Hello, YouTube. So I did a video a little while ago about solo polyamory, and people were interested in that, and a few people have noted that as something they found interesting about me or about my content on my channel. So I thought I would do another video. Specifically this time, I want to talk about being solo polyam and how do I explain this? Being solo polyam and questioning or my sort of doubting myself, doubting the way I am. Not necessarily being solo, but doubting certain things about my values and preferences in relationships based on NRE. NRE stands for New Relationship Energy. It is not exclusive to polyamorous people. It is the feeling when you meet a new person and you're all giddy and stuff, and it can last any amount of time. It could be a few days, it can be a year, it just varies. But it's the initial period, the sort of honeymoon phase, I think is another phrase for it, where you're just really into this person and you can't stop thinking and talking about them. And it comes up a lot in polyam circles, I think, because if you have other relationships, sometimes they might feel a little during the NRE phase with somebody else, they might feel a little neglected, or it's just a different, it's a comparison between NRE and not that comes up a lot. And I'm specifically posting this video on the day that you are seeing it because we have an eclipse, and that eclipse is falling in my 7th house. And 7th house being the house of relationships, strong relationships, partnerships, longer term things. This is not going to be an astrology video, so if you're not into astrology, keep watching. But it's just the occasion for posting this is there's been a lot of stuff going on in my 7th house this year. Wherever you have Capricorn, there's a lot of stuff going on this year. And this eclipse, is all about potentially reevaluating things about the way I see relationships, patterns in relationships, and it's part of a cycle that's been going on for a while astrologically. And so it's had me thinking about how I approach relationships and reevaluating some things. And so this just seemed like a good day to post this video. Specifically, so when I think about NRE, and I think about how I am in a relationship during the NRE phase, and how I am in a relationship once NRE has faded, I noticed a cycle in the relationships that I've had, some of the bigger relationships, I don't know what that means, but more intense, longer term relationships that I've had. Something I notice is that my thinking tends to be very different in the NRE phase, which I think is common. But specifically, for a while, in a few relationships, I had this feeling. So my default state as solo polyamorous, and specifically as solo polyamorous in the way that I am, with a preference for lower time commitments, not prioritizing romantic relationships at the top of my stack of things I prioritize. Being that way, I would find that sometimes I would go into NRE and then I would question all of that. I would be like, wow, I really like this person. And it's not I think this person's going to save me or something, but I don't need to be saved. It's fundamental to being solo polyamorous. I do not need saving. And I do not want to end that practice of putting myself at the center of the hub of relationships. But I would sometimes find that I would get into a relationship and then think, wow, maybe I'm protecting myself too much. I need to be more vulnerable, more open, open myself up more to hurt and rejection. I want to be in a relationship where if they broke up with me, I'd be devastated because I want to have that level of love, that level of connection with someone. And I've had that happen a few times before I started cottoning on to what was happening in a relationship during the first few months. And I'd be like, I'm having a spiritual revelation and I understand so much more now. And the way I usually am is not serving me. And when I first got into astrology, tarot, spiritual and shadow work, spiritual / personal development work. And I would sometimes pull cards or look at an astrological thing, and I would think to myself, aha, you know, the message that it's telling me is that the way I am doesn't work, and a more mature way of being in relationship with somebody is to be more open, vulnerable, and to have that feeling that you'd be devastated if they broke up with you, and to not be like codependent or anything, but just to like, I would think that the shadow, or like what a message was trying to tell me, is that I was overprotecting myself, that I was setting too many boundaries, that if I pushed my limits and took more risk in relationships and prioritized them higher, that a new world would open to me. And that the patterns or beliefs that were not serving me, or that were no longer serving me, as that phrase often comes up, must be self-protection, must be limiting my level of emotional vulnerability, etc. Even though I don't think I consciously do those things. Like, I'm not a super private person at all. I'm an open book. So I'm not like somebody who really like closes himself off, or like is intentionally like hiding bits of me, or like I'm not saying like, oh, here's this line in the sand. I just like, I set some boundaries that are probably a little stronger than some people around my time and energy, and I just don't feel the same level of like, as I do when I'm in NRE. So that was what I thought for a while. And I have come to adjust that thinking, because I've realized this happened in 4 or 5 relationships, and getting to the point where I'm like, wait, I don't think that's it. I think that the pattern or the practice or the belief that is no longer serving me, that some of this recent astrology is like bringing to light, is that that thing I sometimes feel in an NRE, and the belief that that way of relating is better. So the belief that like, oh, there must be some sort of crux moment that's going to happen, and I will open everything up, and I will become a new person, and I will have a revelation, and you know, that belief that is supposed to happen is actually the belief that's not serving me. It is actually the structure that doesn't work and isn't true to my experience. And it probably comes somewhat from societal stuff. So even though I'm very strong in being solo polyamorous, and I'm very strong in being polyamorous in general, and I don't believe that like there's the one who's going to come for me or save me, or like I don't, you know, I never have thought that some relationship is going to fundamentally change everything about me as a person, and that, you know, like, no. But even though I know that, I think that I have been influenced in the way that like I do start to feel in relationships sometimes like maybe the way that I relate is wrong or is not quite right, and that I am in some way subconsciously protecting myself, or subconsciously, because I think that's what I think, is not that it's that it's conscious, but that somehow subconsciously I'm overprotecting, I'm setting too many boundaries, like subconsciously I'm putting up walls to my heart, and some magical like thing is going to come and open that up. I don't think that's true. I think that is the shadow belief. I think that is the belief that doesn't serve. The good news is I'm pretty good at communicating, and I do know myself enough that in the past few relationships I've had where this has happened, I've warned people. Like, I have a girlfriend now where we kind of joked about it, because I told her, I warned her that I'm not, like, she's long distance and I'm not really a texter. Like, I forget my phone exists for, you know, days at a time. And so I'd warned her, like, how much I care about you, my emotional attachment is not directly related to how often I text. Or communicate in general, and that I will just forget, and it doesn't mean anything. And then she kind of laughed at me, because for a while I was texting like 20 times a day, and I was like, this is out of character. But sure enough, like after a few visits, and you know, NRE's kind of settled down, now I forget my phone exists. So I don't think our NRE is bad, and I don't think engaging. If you're somebody who like experiences NRE and notices yourself engaging very differently when in NRE, I don't think that's bad, and I don't think you should beat yourself up about it. But it's useful to know that that may be a different way of relating that does not predict the future and does not predict how you will be when it settles down. And that's one thing I like about, I think polyamorous people tend to know this, and we tend to all joke about NRE and understand that NRE is a special time where you might throw everything out the window, and that it's not a good time to make major decisions. It's not a good time to declare your undying love or move in together or do anything like that, because it's a special time. So yeah, I'm curious, like, if this is the first time you're encountering the concept of NRE or new relationship energy, is this something that resonates with you? Are there, I know a lot of you are kind of curious about solo polyamory, but you're not solo polyamorous or you're not polyamorous at all. But I wonder if some of like what I talked about in terms of limiting beliefs that you think are one thing and then it turns out it's the other thing, like, are there examples of that in your life, in your work, around yourself that you have uncovered? Leave an example below if you're comfortable sharing, because I think this probably is a pretty common experience. And I think it's telling that in a lot of tarot classes, it's like, look at the first meaning of the cards and then keep looking, because probably what your ego initially thinks is the thing is not the thing. So, you know, examples of that below. And if you do want to know more about solo polyamory, my personal experiences, what that relationship style is like, let me know. I'd be happy to talk about it. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe.